Anyone else like to join in? Just take your packet lunch. We don't mind. It's free and easy, and we are informal because it's comics, right?
Yes, yes.
Okay, so earlier on, I hosted a session on Alamat, right, anthology, and it's really about history, and so I suppose Paolo programmed me to host this as well because it's Diliman after over 20 years. So in that sense, I think we are sort of excavating all this. It's not that old, but 20, 30 years. But I think having a sense of history is important. Again, I'm a history teacher, so back in Singapore, and the kids these days do not know anything. To them, TikTok is reality. It's not on TikTok, it's not real, right? But I'll try to tell them the world is bigger than Singapore. It's bigger than whatever it is that they are experiencing through Netflix and all that. So I think it is important to know what happened in the past, and it's great that Tobie, you are continuing with this. So maybe I'll start with the first question. Okay, so the whole point of this session is a book launch. So after this, make sure you buy the book and get him to sign. Okay, yeah. Why are you doing this again? Yeah, yeah. Tell us the origin stories.
Yeah. So the origin story, it will be supported by slides. I'll be playing the slides. I'll just cue each time we'll move. So yeah. So Diliman Generation Now is a comic. It's horror. So if there are anyone in the audience who does not like horrific images, please be warned. There may be images that might be triggering. But it touches on supernatural things. It touches on Salamanca. It also touches on people and their search for identity, for friendship, as well as how lies can be very powerful. So the book, next slide please. Sorry, next slide please. So the book is, it's meant to span across many years, and it talks about how a group of friends go through all these things and how they try to survive the travails of the world. The book itself, surprisingly, goes through a similar path. And to go through it historically, next slide please. Sorry, next slide please. Yeah. So way back in 1997 was when I first conceptualized the first book. Next slide, please. This was Diliman. Diliman was created after I saw this old book by Budget and Brandy Tan. It was called Payaso. It was this horror, sketchy drawing of a clown that would kill people for doing bad things. And in addition to that, inspiration came from Arnold Ayres' mythology class, which had a much more anime feel, supernatural touches, and friendship. And I found myself thinking, why not a grittier, darker approach to that? Next slide, please. So that's when I decided to make my own comic. And Diliman, the first book came out. Smells Like Horses was the title because it talked about the first character being killed by a tikbalang. And that becomes the spark that unleashes, next slide please, the next few levels of the story. From 1997 to 2003, I ended up releasing around 5 issues as the story grew more and more. And at this point in time, there was still no... The comics was pretty much still a very niche thing. Very few people really created it. Those who did were people who could afford to. So in my case, I was making my comics and I was actually burning them in CDs. Who remembers CDs?
I think that was pretty much the case in the 90s where not many people were doing comics. And
yes.
I would say, yeah.
And
so you guys, in a sense, were pioneers.
Yeah. They were. I was inspired by them. I would not count myself among the pioneers. But I was burning CDs and releasing the issues that way. Next slide, please. By the next year, I found myself overwhelmed with so much inspiration that within 1 year, I released 5 more issues. So for someone who had no real following, I was just sharing my stuff online. And by online, I mean posting them on message groups for people to read. I was actually encouraged to keep going. Next slide, please. And eventually, through multiple relationships, heartbreaks, calamities, moving out, finding work, and all this and that, I was able to finish 15 issues of my book, Diliman, which never got published. And at most was available online on Blogspot. Until now, it's still available on Blogspot. And I was content thinking that's the only That's the furthest it can go. All the files were scanned at 72 dpi, so they can never be printed. And all the original art is still unscanned, hand-drawn pages, which if I were ever to re-release this, I will have to redraw everything. Or at least rescan and retouch everything. So I gave up on this. But surprisingly, despite me having given up on it, it still had a life of its own. Next slide, please. In the years that followed, this was the early Comic Con in UP, Bahay ng Alumni, I think. I was selling the DVDs. They were wrapped in those pieces of paper. I actually sold out. I was so happy. But then I started getting comments from people who found it interesting. Budget Tan, who eventually created Trece. At that time, it wasn't out yet. Albert Orr, Carlo Vergara, who's a great friend. Next slide, please. When it hit the 10th year anniversary, people started making wallpapers, which again astounded me because who am I? And yeah, it was happening. Next slide, please. And at one point, it nearly became a TV series. A friend pitched it at ABS-CBN. It won Best Design, but sadly, it did not proceed beyond the pitching phase. Next slide, please. So in the end, I kept thinking there was potential in this brand. There was a story that people liked and related with. And early 2 years ago, I was thinking maybe I'll make a spin-off. I'll make a role-playing game since I love tabletop role-playing games. And that's the last chance for Diliman to have life again. Next slide, please. I was wrong. Because around that point in time, I discovered Procreate exists, and I realized Procreate allowed me to draw when I wanted to with the devices. And I am not an endorser. I just want to admit it helped me realize I can do it again. So with 2023, next slide please. Yes. I started drawing. And as I started drawing on Procreate, next slide please, I realized I wanted a story where everything I went through, both for the book and for the story itself, was interconnected. Next slide please. So that led to Diliman Generation Now, which is in many ways, I think, my opus as far as comics are concerned. This is probably my last stab at trying to get into the market. It touches on events in 1990 when the main characters of the first book were still kids playing role-playing games and becoming friends. Early 1996 when we see events that travel from that point to the present. And 2023, the current day. But then, we have events of the first book embedded in the story. That's right. So we have events of the first book, which is 1997, embedded in it. And then we are now also reaching far back to the events.
1565
yes.
to 1898.
Because I'm touching on how the concepts of Salamanca, the concepts of Bailan and the like have been twisted and reused and readjusted to suit political purposes. Next slide, please. In many ways, Diliman is about how it's the power of presence, the overwhelming influence of religion, and the horrors that can exist behind both if you don't look hard enough. It's a book that is not for everyone. It's a book that might touch on identity, on gender norms, on friendship. But it's also a book that, to the very least, I hope when people read it, they'll think, they'll ask questions, and they'll come up with their own answers. Next slide, please. So, these are some glimpses of the coming panels and pages. As you could see, it's quite dark in its own ways. And in this last one, I don't know if it's that clear, the book from 1997 is part of the story. So those who read the first book, or those who choose to read the website, will actually have a second layer to appreciate the current book. But those who don't will still have a full story. Next slide, please. So there. Do you read comics? If you do, I hope you give Diliman Generation Now a chance. Next slide, please. And this is now, this year. Next slide, please. I am at booth 25, in case you want to check the comic. We can stop here, but don't close it, in case we'll talk about the characters na naka-ready na. But yes, I'm at booth 25, so if you want to check out the book, I'm there, and I am happy to answer any questions about this ambitious project I have in front of you.
So thanks for that, and it is very helpful because I was telling Tobie that actually, again, we cannot assume that people know this series. So let's give the audience a chance to know this, so they can support it. So I think this is very good to give that history. So just to be clear, so far only this is available at the booth, or there are other books that we can
so
buy.
when I originally was working on the 2024 book, my plan was to just do a digital release because again, that's how far I went with the first book. So I was very humbled and honored to be invited to have a publisher. Paolo reached out and said he wants to publish the book. And when I was like, wait, it's not even done yet. Why are you approaching me? But he was like, no. I saw your work and I think there's a lot of potential. Then I told him, but I'm not done. And I'm looking at least 300 plus pages. So for the event, we decided to have the zine. The zine is now a limited edition first episode. It has enough of the story to get a taste of what's to come, but also enough hints of what is there in store for the future.
Yeah. So you have a day job, right? Currently, you're not doing comics full time, right?
No, my day job is the booth, in the same booth. On the other side is Leaderboard, which is our kid line. It's about fun activities, geeky stuff. It's an animated series we're pitching in Annecy and creative.
Because it's really a pity, because you have done, I think that the first volume was like 300 pages around there, and of course, I went to take a look at the blog spot, and I tried reading it. It's too much, and I'm old school, right? I prefer paper, right? And I really wish that you have the time, and this is your day job, and you can actually go and rescan, touch up. I mean, just like Dave Sim, Cerebus, right? His phone books for Cerebus. So I think that I'm about to say there is a market for that, but let's hope there is a market for that, because I prefer hard copy.
And there's always a joy in holding it, being able to turn the pages. There's something magical when you turn the page and it's a jump scare, or there's that reveal moment that happens that digital just doesn't successfully do, even with animation.
So currently, people just have to read it online. Is there any, let's say if this one really takes off, will you consider going back? Because it's a lot of backstory, and I think it's quite crucial. Because I was reading this, and it refers to a lot of events in the past.
So currently, I've actually illustrated 5 of the 13 episodes for this new series. Maybe if the push on the sales is strong enough, maybe we'll see zines for the other episodes as well. That depends if Paulo will choose to. But at the same time, in terms of the first book, I'm not sure if I'm in the mental headspace to go through it again and recreate it. There's a rawness that I kind of appreciate when I look back at my old work, even if it's terrible in some instances when you look at your art and you're like, oh my god, I drew that. But I guess there is that desire to make it in a more available media or available option as well.
Yeah, it's like the archival edition, right? Where it is what it is.
Yes.
Yeah, something like that.
And it's also a product of its time. So those who read the old book, please, I apologize in advance. There are word choices and scenes that are now questionable in this day and age. So please be aware that it's a trigger word.
So of course in Asia and specifically Southeast Asia, and when you look at Thailand, Indonesia, even Malaysia, Singapore, actually horror is a central trope or genre or theme. All right, and of course I have my own theories on it, because I think horror allow us to talk about things we can't talk about. So for example, I teach history, and I think one of the central things that run through in Southeast Asia, post-war, is authoritarian regimes. All right, and like you say, things don't change, right? The horror continues, and you don't look closely, actually it's there, right? Whether it's in Thailand or even in Indonesia, of course, you know what's happening in Myanmar now, all right? So I'm saying out loud. So yeah, I just want to hear your take on it. It is very popular in movies, all right? Like horror movies in Indonesia, Malaysia, their box office, but and when I look at Philippine comics, actually a lot of it about monsters, demons. So yeah, why do you think there's this so much interest and
So I think for Philippine audiences, horror is very accessible because we all grow up with our own share of scary or horror stories. Stories that were either used to discipline us as kids. You know, don't go out, it's late, there's a monster out there, or don't be the naughty kid, the monster will take you away. It's stuff from that, but it's also stuff from the fact that we are a country of regions, and in every regional area, there's their own definition or there's their own mythology that is prevalent or present. With even religion being one of the more common ones. Not to say that religion is a mythology, but that it is a source of fear for many kids growing up. Am I good enough? Will I burn in hell? Am I doing something bad? Is something out there seeing me? And all of this translates to stories that we can all relate with. So when we have local storytellers finding a story they want to share, horror tends to be an easy thing they could find. I also feel generally horror is a strong genre because it's rooted in pride. Pride. How many horror stories now exist because people were just too proud to admit something happened in a different way. You know, this happened. Why? A monster attacked. They don't want to admit they weren't responsible, or they don't want to admit they didn't pay attention. So they blame something non-existent. They blame something strange, and now it grows into a myth everyone can latch on to throw the blame. So rather than accept their faults, there is a monster that's not me. And I always found that fascinating as something to explore because, you know, if people just stopped lying, then there would be far less monsters out there. It's okay.
Actually, it's a very good point, right? Horror stories are rooted in pride. That's a very good point. So really, it's us, our own brains messing us up, right?
And not wanting to be the monster, not wanting to be the bad guy. So we blame something that's worse than us that no one can ever see.
Bigger than life. Yeah. Other people are the bad guys. We are the good guys.
And that's my mom. Hi, mom. She always found me weird. She used to bless and pray over me when I was sleeping.
So are you surprised by the longevity of this series that people are coming up to you and say, hey, you know, I enjoy this, and then like, hey, well, that's like 10 years ago?
Tremendously, because admittedly it was literally a project that was born from me admiring others who have created comics. When Flashpoint was released, that's by a group of early comic creators, including Carlo Vergara, David Hontiveros, Joey Gojo, and the like. I was so overwhelmed that local comics can be created that I wrote them a fan mail. And to my surprise, they visited me and thanked me for my letter. And when that happened, I realized if they can do it, maybe I can too. So I really just started making comics because I wanted to tell a story, and I thought maybe I can do it. I never really had the support that many other lines had. You know, I never really got major followings in that. So I always thought it was out there and no one really noticed. So it always surprises me when people come up to me, or I hear from people who say, hey, I read your comic before, or I remember the comic from the message boards, and I'm like, I exist. And to now be published this year after all these years, it's an affirmation that I did not expect I wanted or needed, but I'm grateful to have.
And was it started during when you were in university, or?
Yeah, I was in college. So college years was around 1994. So the first book came out 1997. Around that time, I was also still in the verge of finding my sexuality, finding my identity. So a lot of that I channeled in the comic. There's parts in the comic where one of the characters realizes he might not be straight, and in many ways that was me speaking about it because I couldn't then, and it wasn't a time then when you could just openly talk about it.
Inner demons at large,
Yes.
demons of society.
And again, horror rooted in pride. Feeling shame, so rather than embracing the shame and being honest, you push it out into a monster.
And was this popular among university students? That's the sense I got reading your notes.
My classmates always nagged me for the next issue. There were friends who were asking me online for it, but I always thought it was just friends being nice. So I guess I never really just thought of myself as a comic creator, and it was nice to know that people appreciated what I worked on.
And of course, reading this, I found it. I mean, to me, there are several layers, and of course, it helps that it has this whole backstory, which you have to go online to find out. And okay, to me, it's actually a lot of political overtones. So yeah, maybe you want to talk about that.
So part of that is simply because of we are living in an age where misinformation and what they call fake news, and I use what they call because even non-fake news is now being labeled that, is so prevalent and so insidious in affecting people that I wanted that to be something to latch onto as my message. As also someone who has been targeted and cancelled online in the past, I know how the select choice of words can be weaponized against you in such insidious ways that I wanted to be able to explore that as a way of dealing with the trauma I went through back then as well. And what I realized was that there was an interconnection I felt in terms of history on how we always tend to turn a blind eye on things that don't involve us because it's easier to pretend it's them and not us.
Not in my own backyard.
Yes.
Oh,
And that's what I wanted to explore as a larger picture in the book as well.
okay. You don't have to answer this, but you say you've been cancelled before. I mean, yeah. What happened?
I'll leave it as disagreements that could have been resolved if conversations were started. And since they were not, everyone was hearing different versions of the picture, and some thought it would be safer to just believe the accuser than to hear the accused. And for me, that was a very painful moment because I had no opportunity to even defend myself. But the scary thing was I understood where they were coming from. Because like if someone, for example, went through sexual abuse, you should believe the accuser. You know, don't question them for having the courage to speak up. So I understood both sides, and I hated the fact it made sense to me. So I found a way to exercise that and at least make it part of my growth rather than to dwell in it and hate myself for it.
I think that's the issue about online and cyberspace, right? And I always share with the students, whatever you say it in my face. If not, don't say it, right? I mean, but of course, there is a safe space online as well, right? Because, you know, because of certain circumstances, you cannot put down your real name and all that, and you want to whistleblow, I can understand that. But if, let's say, if it's just a normal situation, just approach that person. All right, do not just, you know, form a WhatsApp chat group and start talking about that person. It's not healthy. But I think in today's context, a lot of people can't talk to each other face to face, and that's very sad.
Yeah, and I guess to add, we're human. In the end, we all make mistakes. Sometimes we make mistakes because we don't know better. Other times we make mistakes because we thought we knew what was best. And I think as humans, we should also keep in mind that everyone deserves a chance to realize their mistakes rather than just be punished or terrorized for it. I mean, yes, there are mistakes that are inconceivably evil, but we shouldn't lump everything under that category just because we have a sandbox to stand on and let everyone else hear it. So, yeah.
It become very serious conversation.
Yes.
But I think this is where I believe comics, like all art form, it could be music, movies, play, a poem, all right, it's supposed to spur conversation, and it could be about serious topics that we don't want to talk about, like you say, you know, things that we want to stick our head in the mud, but actually the world will still happen, the wind will still blow, there will still be a Microsoft outage like yesterday, you know, so you know, that's also some people have missed their flights and they couldn't get here. Yeah, but I think talking and confronting is actually much better, no matter how painful it is. Yeah.
And I like that comics offers the opportunity to discuss things that might not seem like the world is ready for them yet. I remember in my younger years when I was still in the process of understanding myself, it was in certain comics like DC Vertigo's The Enigma, where I was able to read and get a glimpse of maybe I am not who I think I am. And, if comics that covered if any literature that covered such material was just banned outright because it was deemed too sensitive, then we would be as a people lesser, and we would have less rich lives in the sense of understanding ourselves and finding ourselves, because everyone has their own road to take, right? Everyone has their own journey and their own story. And in my case, comics has given me that opportunity to step out of what I thought my world was and grow richer for it. And in many ways, that's my attempts as well. In my comics, I'm hoping people will find something they find useful within it, something they can relate with, or something they can draw strength from. And if it's something they hate, then that's fine, because it's not for them. But if it's something that in the end they feel they've become a richer person, then I think I've done my job.
Yeah, actually that's a very underrated series by Peter Milligan, right? If I remember correctly, Enigma. Yeah. So comics, it educates, it also entertains, and I think it's a very powerful medium. Okay, so right now, let's open up the floor before we just start talking like world peace and how to save the world.
Yeah, but I'm open for questions if anyone wants to ask. And I've also prepared slides for the characters in case you want to know.
Just any questions, just to because I always like Q&A, because it's questions that I didn't think about. Anyone like to ask question?
Shy.
Yeah, this is where we practice wait time, right? Wait for the students to ask. Okay, maybe if not, why don't you just make sure you all think of a questions, okay? I'll come back to you all.
Yeah, and maybe there will be questions based on the characters. So can we show the next slide, please? So to just go through the new books list of characters in case they will be interesting for you. Diliman Generation Now's host of characters include, so we have Dev Asuncion. I will apologize to my partner. I'm in this Dev Patel crushy moment, so he keeps appearing in all my works. Dev is a young government guy who starts to understand that he might have been pulled into this thing that he did not expect. I'm being vague in purpose. But he then starts searching for the group known as the Diliman terrorist group in hopes of getting them to prove he's not one of them. Tied with him is Joseph Calixto, a young police officer who Dev bumped into in a very private moment that's in episode 3. But they both now become embroiled in the lie that unfolds and try to find their way out of it. Beyond them, we have CT Lim, a young entrepreneur who has started a business. She uses drones and rents them out to people for whatever purposes they need. One of the spoilers, one of the secrets that she has is the fact that she is related in some way to Princess Carpenter, the Vice President of the Philippines. Princess Carpenter is pushing this very strong agenda where she wants everyone to report and find out if your neighbors are salamanqueros, they're magic users. She has this artifact known as the Inang Bato, what she uses to identify if you are one, and they deal with you because you are a threat to the country. Whether or not this is true, the story will reveal. Next one, please. Then we have the original Diliman terrorist group, as they were called. Rich Maximo, who is the sole survivor, supposedly. He supposedly survived in the first book and is now on the run. We have Bambi and Gabriel Antonio. Yes, younger years, you name characters after yourself. I apologize. But both characters have been presumably dead, with Gabe being the titular character who first died in the first book, in the very first issue, in the hands of the Tikbalang.
And that's why we need the old series. It's like, I want to read. Yeah. I want to refer back to it.
Because of their actions in the Diliman terrorist group's activities, the Madrigal law has been passed that bans all Salamanca and the use of magic in the country. Next slide, please. Then you have the extended group of the terrorist group. These are all side characters in the first book, but they are now appearing in the new book as children who you learn about them. Dian, Al, Teal, Matt, John, and Duck. They are all named after friends who showed their support when the comics was still going on. And as far as the modern book, they're all dead. And then next page, please. I'm so sorry. Then we have our antagonists, or at least who we believe to be the antagonists. General Mon Martinez is the celebrated military man who has successfully ended the war on drugs and now starts the war on the Salamanqueros. One of the people who is also pulled into this is Private Jun Cabrera, a police lieutenant inspector who is he lost his son in the drug war and now feels very obligated to be a bigger role in the Salamanquero war. But whether or not he will remain a villain for long as part of Team Unite remains to be seen. Up there is our visual monster. He is present in the early books, but I left no information because you'll just have to read it to learn more about him. Next slide, please. But yeah, so as mentioned, it's one story about friendship and betrayal that's told across time. It goes through from the 1500s all the way to 2024. Next slide, please. And Diliman generation now is not for kids. It will have a lot of trigger warnings, violence, religion, occult, government, torture. There are a lot of graphic scenes, so please, if you're not into that, do not check the book out. But if you are, yay, you're my people. Next slide, please. So these are my contacts in case you need to get in touch with me. If there are questions, the floor is now open.
Are there any fans from back then? Maybe you can share.
They're all shy, but I can see them.
Okay, point it out.
I can see some.
In the classroom, we all say, okay, you answer. Alright, no one wants to volunteer to answer.
Yeah. And I'll have to admit, Mom, I'm sorry, I know this is shocking you. You've never seen this. You've always been supportive of me, and I love you for being supportive of me. But you've never seen this. My mom has given me my belief in my faith. But it is also because of the strength of my faith, I know I can explore dark stories and not be faced by them.
Come on. Okay, yes, great.
Sige, you first, Doc.
Sure.
And then you after.
Yay, congrats, Tobie.
Thank you, Mikey.
Pero ano, you would refer to yourself sometimes as a lapsed artist in the past, but you're no longer lapsed as of today, no? Yay. So, we're curious about the process of the internal process of you getting back onto the scene. You've been gone for a long time. Well, long time. What did it take for you to finally make the jump back? Maybe it's something that we can all learn from, no? Just in case we run into that situation.
Okay, this will be a tricky answer. My apologies to everyone single, but it's a supportive partner. I've always had the idea of, it always comes to your mind, like maybe I should try comics again, maybe I should do it again, but it never goes beyond the thought. And at one point, I shared it to my partner Rocky, and I mentioned, maybe I should do comics again, and he's like, just do it. I was like, yeah, but Procreate is so expensive and it only works with an iPad Pro. Just buy it. And you really need the supportive partner. You need someone who, even if they're not into it, if they're there to say, just do it, someone who will enable you. It's the world. So if you are a creative, share your work with the people you love, even if they don't get it, because you will need that support. And if you are not the creative, support your partner even if you don't get it, because it will mean the world to them.
There's another question you say?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
First off, that was a very nice PowerPoint, by the way. So much animation. but I don't know if this question is too on the nose, but it's about one of the characters. Because all the character names are, of course, pretty normal, but then you decided to name one of the characters Vice President, specifically Princess Carpenter.
Yes.
Like, is there like anything behind that?
Ooh. This is very revelatory. So names are always important. Names carry meaning. Names either guide. In my case, when I name someone, I name it because it guides the personality, or it guides the identity. Some of the characters literally were named based on friends' names because there were qualities of them I wanted to embody in their character. And I asked their permission, and they said yes. And I'm so happy. At some point, I told them, "Sorry, I killed you off," and they're like, "It's okay." So carpenter, there's an older word for carpenter that will resonate who I based her on. In terms of appearance, I will admit it's the actress who did Misery. It is, oh my god, names, I forgot. Kathy Bates. There you go. Thank you, love. So it's based on Kathy Bates, the appearance. And yes, I've had some people ask, oh, that looks like someone else. And for my safety, I will say it is Kathy Bates. Because this is the Philippines. But yes, look up the old word for carpenter. You might find more clues there.
Google will, no. Oh, I think he's going to Google.
Hey, we can see the screen. We can see the screen. But I guess that gives you a glimpse of what my books are like. I do love inserting little Easter eggs or clues or tidbits like that. I'm a sucker for popcorn books like Dan Brown books. I know they're not smart, but they're just so darn entertaining. But at the same time, I'm also I love escape rooms. I love psychological thrillers. So in this book, I kind of sort of wanted to layer things that way as well.
No, I mean, Dan Brown books, you learn a bit about art history as well, right? You do. I mean,
Yeah, I just hope people don't say I'm the Dan Brown of the Philippines. Please don't.
but you will make a lot of money.
Pay me first.
Any other questions?
Yeah, anyone? Do you have any other questions? Yes.
So, have you mostly kept to yourself all these years, or have you been building up a following over time?
No following as far as comics is concerned, to be honest. I'm more. So I do a lot of things. I was very active in the tabletop RPG thing. I wrote games, I released them, got published there as well. Active in the mobile gaming industry, day job. So I do games there, I do talks. I've handled a few events as well in regards to that. So as far as the creative space is concerned, I've been pretty much dipping my toes in everything. I also did theater. There was that very brief modeling stint when I was young. I don't know why, but that happened.
Sample.
No. But in terms of comics, none. I actually have not even been in touch with any of the communities, which is why when I learned that Diliman was given the publication option, and then that I was going to be in a convention, I literally told my partner, I'm going to have a signing and no one will show up. But then I told myself, if no one shows up, then I can claim a lot of people showed up. So I decided to just go for it. And in many ways, that's what this project has been also about. You just go for it, even if you don't know if people will like it. It's your story. It's your passion. And if you find an audience, then appreciate them. If you don't, it's still your baby that you released out there. No one can blame you for releasing something you wanted.
I think that's the whole spirit of PICOF and what Paulo and team are doing, right? It's really that old school DIY, do it yourself, and just do it, right? You
Yes.
all you need is 3 chords and a guitar and just form a band. Any other questions? Okay, maybe I'll just ask one. Of course, you have laid out, the next few chapters, but really, any long-term plans, for this universe?
So for Diliman, okay, I'm not sure yet. Someone did mention to me they want to see a script. So I can't say anything yet about that one. I'm nervous if that will happen. If it does, then I'm excited, but I'm also scared how much it will change because that's a different medium. And when there are different media, things change a lot, right? We can't, sometimes you're a good guy who is able to adapt something. Other times you're a great person who makes a movie like the Avatar movie we do not talk about. So, but that's the thing, right? In different media, people get involved, so things can change. So I'm not sure yet if that's really going to go anywhere. In terms of the old book, if the reception is strong, then maybe I will revisit it. Maybe I will find a chance to re-release it. But if ever that will happen, it will have to be after this one, because I don't want the publication of the full book to be delayed. But lastly, I have been dreaming of coming up with a more slice of life type of story, maybe one that features gay characters and how it doesn't necessarily have to always be graphic, but it can be still true to the identity. And I have nothing against, very happy, sexually active characters in comics. It deserves its own audience. But sometimes I also want to tell stories that don't necessarily have to always be about that, right? So a little bit more Tales in the City and a little bit less, what's that show I hate? That everyone loves.
Queer as Folk?
Queer as Folk. Yeah. So there. I think that's pretty much it.
Because of course, different medium has its different strengths. I can imagine this becoming a game, for example. But of course, like you say, things might change. So it's how much you can tolerate or negotiate with. And I could see that there could be some characters here that can do spin-off as well, right? And may not even be tied to the main story. It could be their own side story, and it's a totally different genre. Yeah, you can have lots of that.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Any questions? Going once, going twice.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
So, how do you go about your production process with this type of work, actually?
So definitely I sneak in time to work on it whenever I can. Thankfully, my partner now scolds me if I overdo it. I did injure my hand some weeks back because I drew too much in one day and I had it on a splint for a few days. But Procreate has been my godsend. I used to draw things on paper, Unipen, pencils and all that. But then now I think I gotten too used to digital, so I had to relearn to draw. So I spent a few weeks just drawing lines and squares and circles. And then once I started to feel more confident, I started to draw again. I do use photo references a lot. I know I've wasted over 20 years where I could have been drawing nonstop, so my art would be better. But since I didn't, I'm now approaching this more like a director, wherein I use photos for references. I post them in the background I need, and then I use that as my skeleton to build my images. I still state I'm not a good artist, despite Mikey teasing me about it, because I've always felt my power has been in my storytelling. But I also know that I'll be faster if I just try to draw it myself. So I do know my art is not consistent. Faces warp, chins disappear, but I think that's fine as long as you get what's going on and you can understand the story. your art doesn't have to be perfect. So I hope that helps give you an idea. But it's Procreate really. Just make sure you get the settings right, because I did trash like 20 pages in my first attempt because it was at 72 dpi again. So I'm like, I can't use this. This one actually is wrong. It's the dimensions are too small, so I still have to blow up the image slightly for publication. But it's at 300 at least.
I think that's the minimum you need, right? Around 300 dpi.
So I hope that helps.
Okay, so remind us again, which booth are you at?
That's booth 25. I did not know the seating. I'm covering it. You'll also find, other than Diliman, you'll also find our other comic there, Leaderboard, which is more for kids. It's got activities and the like. So when I'm working in my day job, it's Leaderboard. When I go back to independent work, it's Diliman. If that tells you more about me, then you know me more.
Okay, so I'll give you a chance to run there and start queuing up. But round of applause for Tobie. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.